I am now. Okay. So I'll just say all again, for those who weren't here. Today I'm going to cover colour atlases and gradients for texturing, yeah, assets. It's very, very useful for kind of that low poly style world where you have solid colours, because you can literally just use one material on absolutely everything, regardless of its colour. But I do want to go a little bit. I have covered colour atlases very briefly in the past, but today I want to go into a little bit more depth and cover gradients. So before Pony reminded me to start recording, I was just about to start modelling something. So I'm going to bring in a plane, and I think what I'll do is add, I'm making this up as I go along, by the way, a subdivision surface. We'll give it 2 subdivisions, and we'll select these 2 vertices and scale them with the S key and just move that down, and we've got a kind of an interesting petal kind of shape. I will add an array modifier, I think, probably. What I'll do is I'll select everything and move it up so that our object origin is here, and I'm going to add in an empty because I want it to be a kind of rotation controller. So I'll select this. Let's see, I'm going to make 5. I've decided already I'm making a flower. So no, that's not right. That's me. Let's just minimize that so I don't get confused. It's the array. I want 5 petals on my flower. I'm not going to use relative offset. I'm going to use object offset, and my object's going to be the empty. So now I can rotate this on the Z and we'll get a nice flowery shape, but I want it to be perfect, so I'm going to say 360 degrees divided by 5 because we've got 5 petals, and that's an exact flower shape thing. And then I think I'm going to add another modifier, so I'll minimize that one, and I'm going to add, let's make it a simple deform, set it to bend, and then I want an object to control that as well. So I'm going to add in, this time I am going to add in a cube, but I'm just going to make it really small, and I'll tell it that the cube is my object. Probably going to have to rotate that. I think usually I have to rotate the X by 90 maybe. What's that like? I think we'll probably need to move this deform above the array so it deforms the petal, there we go, before it actually arrays it. So now I can adjust the curve on it, and we'll shade smooth, and I'll go into top view and I'll just move all of that down so that it's kind of nearly touching or just touching. That'll do for a basic flower shape. Just adjust that curve a bit more to however you want it to be like. And then the last thing I'm going to add is a solidify modifier. But I think I might shade this auto smooth. There we go. And that's just sorted out that weird shading issue that we had. If you find that you've got any sharp edges when you've applied auto smooth, just adjust the angle on the normals. If I take this down too far, you'll see this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. So it was set to 30, we'll just put it back to about 30. That's the default amount, but you just adjust that until it's to your liking. So I think I'm more or less happy with that. So I'm just going to apply all the modifiers, and now I can get rid of the cube and I can get rid of the empty, and and we'll just add a little bit of a centre for that flower as well. So we'll bring in an icosphere. I'll go into X-ray mode and I'll select all of these and just delete them. And then I should be able to just scale that down to roughly the size I want. And we'll shade that smooth as well. And I'll apply that. And I could actually probably I should have textured the petal before I applied the modifier, and then it would have the same texture on all of them, but we're going to have to do them separately. So I'll join all this so it's one object. That'll do for now. I'm not going to bother finishing off the bottom and a stalk and leaves and things. We'll see how we get on. But if I go into material view, what I want to do is have just this is where the colour atlas is going to be plugged into the base colour, but we need to create it first. So I'm just going to use GIMP to do that, and let's see, I want the flower to be, say, red on the most of the petals and maybe fade to a yellowy colour as it reaches the centre. So I'll go into GIMP and I'll create an image. I'm going to make it a 1K texture on this occasion. Normally I use tiny textures. I use, like, you know, maybe 64 by 64 pixels, and that's it. And I'll use an individual pixel for the colour, but on this occasion I'm not, because we need to create gradients and we need plenty of pixels to have every different shade of colour as it transitions from one colour to another. So I'm going to use a 1K texture in this instance, and I'm just going to add a grid. I think might be the easiest thing that I can select with the magic wand tool and colour the squares of the grid. And the easiest way to add a grid is just with the filters. Filter, render, pattern, checkerboard. And then because it's a 1K texture, I'll maybe make that 64, and that should give us 16 by 16. So I've basically got every single one of these squares can be an individual colour. So that should be more than enough to colour a scene. But I'll show you how to use the colours as well with the UV unwrapping. So I'm just going to, as I say, use my magic wand tool, and we can select that box and pick a colour. Let's say we want it red, but I want it to be maybe a bit more of a pinky red, something like that. Yeah, something like that. And I'll use my bucket fill and just click in there. And then the next one down, I'll make that yellow, I guess. That'll do. Bucket fill and fill that. So straight away we've got something usable. I could export that. I'm just going to leave it named as untitled, and I'm going to stick it in my temp folder because I can delete it easily. And then back into Blender. I just need to open up the image I've created. So say temp, and it was called untitled, and I'll drag it into there and plug it into the colour. And you'll see we've got a lovely checkerboard pattern all over our object. So what we need to do is go into UV editing. We'll start with the centre because that's easy. These are all individual discrete objects. They're not actually connected. So if I select one of these and hit L for linked, it'll select everything in that discrete object, and that's all. And I think what I'll do is just do a basic UV unwrap. So UV unwrap, and we've got this shape here, and you can either scale it right down, or you could hit merged centre, and it's literally on one dot, and this is where it comes in handy with the tiny little images with pixels of colour, because you can literally place that on a single pixel and the whole thing will be that colour. If I go into material view, you'll see that's now yellow. As I move it around, it's flashing because it's going over black and white boxes, but then it settles on the yellow. I could, like I say, just scale it right down. As long as it fits inside that box, you're good. And it does. There's no overlap, so that is perfect for the centre. I'm just going to adjust that shading though. I don't like it when it gives it a bit of shininess. I'm just going to make it fully rough, so all you're seeing is the colour. So we'll do one of these petals, and again we just do a standard unwrap perhaps. No, I don't think we will. I think what I might do is just go to top down view, and I'll do all of them, and I'm just going to do a project view, so we've got this flowery shape here, and I'll scale that down. Make sure it fits, scale it down a bit more, and we've got a red flower with a yellow centre. But I wanted a gradient, so back to GIMP. Now, the more boxes you choose to spread your gradient over, obviously the more rows of pixels you have, and the more even your gradient's going to be. If you only use a few boxes and it's a larger object, you're likely to get banding, for obvious reasons, because haven't got as many pixels to spread those colours over. But don't know how this is going to work, but we'll try with maybe, I'm going to hold down shift and select a few. 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8. We'll have like half of the depth of the square. And here, if you hold down your left mouse button on the bucket fill, you've also got the option of a gradient. So we'll choose that. And it seems to have colours already chosen, but that doesn't really matter, I don't think, because we're going to change them anyway. So we'll click at the very top of this box, and if I hold down Control, it will actually lock it to the axis. And then we can change that colour, and I'm just going to use the eyedropper tool and choose the red. And that one, well, it's yellow anyway, but we'll pick the one we've got for the centre. And there is our gradient. So we can export it back to Blender. And then if we hit Alt and R, it'll refresh the image. So we've now got our gradient. And then it becomes a little bit more... yeah, a little bit more in depth. Let's have a look. We'll select this one and do a project from view. And I will bring it over here. And then right at the top, I'm going to select that top vertex, and I'm going to place my cursor there. So that is now my pivot point. And if I change this up here to 2D cursor, it'll use that as the pivot point. So we'll select everything again. We'll scale it on the x-axis so that it fits inside the width of this gradient box. And then we can scale it on the y. So it goes all the way down. And we've got a bit of a gradient going on, which looks rather nice. Now, if you want that yellow to be a little bit further down, what you can do is, I should probably have undone all of that, never mind. We'll just do that again, that's not all of them. Come on. Let's try again. Magic wand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Gradient. Down to there. Now, you've got a centre point here which you can move around, and you can see it moves. It adjusts the gradient. So I'm going to move it down a little bit to maybe about there, and then try exporting it back to Blender. And no, refresh. And now the yellowy orangey colour is closer to the centre. So we'll, I guess, just do the same with the rest. Like I say, this is where I've fluffed up, because if I'd done it before I applied the modifiers, I could have just altered the very basic, the one when it had, before it had the array applied, basically. I'm sure you understand what I mean. So we've done that. If you don't, just say we'll move it over here, and we'll rotate it and scale it on the X, scale it on the Y. And the last one.
Just hit space makers. Oh, full room.
There we go. Oh, I've got white at the tops of them. Yeah, well, there you go. Let's fix that. There we go. So, we got a flower kind of going on. You can do some pretty cool things as well with this. So, let's see if we can make maybe kind of a leaf, or a, I don't know what you call them. Is it sepals or sepals, the little things under the flowers? We'll create something like that. And we'll, oop, didn't mean to hide that now. Honestly, what am I like? G, not H, G. I've still got a bit of a white thing there. I want to fix that. Sorry, that's going to bug me.
Nah, you see what I mean?
There we go. Right, so we'll do the same thing again and add a subdivision surface. And actually, I think what I'll do is I'll just subdivide it first. And we'll take the top and the bottom and scale those right down on the X. Just something like that. And scale these down so it kind of looks how we want. These have gone wrong now. Something like that, anyway. Yeah, that'll do. And I'll do the same thing again. I'll probably scale that down a bit, except I'll do it in edit mode. and we'll move it up so that the centre's there, and we'll do the same thing again and add an array, and we'll also, I'm going to put the cursor there so when I spawn in an empty again, it'll be on the cursor. And let's give this a different number. We'll make it 6 so they're not like directly underneath the petals. Turn off the relative offset, use the object. The object's going to be the empty, and we're gonna now do 360 divided by 6, and there we go. So that's okay. And we'll give that a little bit of a bend as well, because I quite like how that worked with the other one. So we'll add a simple deform, but if you remember, it had to be before the array but after the subdivision. There we go, bend. And we're going to add in, it doesn't have to be a cube, but I just use a cube because that's what I've always done. And I think we had to rotate it by 90 on the X for some reason to make it work. And we choose the cube, and yeah, we'll just leave that like that. I think that's quite nice. Auto smooth, and we'll add a, we'll not add a solidify just yet actually. No, we won't. Or will we? Yeah, let's add the solidify because we can do it all afterwards. Right, okay. So I'm just going to hide the cube and I'm going to hide the empty for now. So now if we go into edit mode, you'll see I've got the basic thing there. But we need all of the vertices, that's what we need. So I'm going to apply the subdivision. So now go into edit mode and I've got the full thing. Way too many subdivisions. I can get rid of a load of these, but we'll do it afterwards. What I want to do is go into top view, and this time if I do project from view, when we go into the UV edit, and you'll see we've got a perfect leaf shape exactly as it should be. So I'm going to see if I can do something cool with that. So let's give it the same material that the flowers got. Back into UV editing, and we need some green. We need some green. So let's go back to GIMP, and we'll do another gradient. I drag it from top to bottom, holding down control so it's straight, and then I'm going to change one of them to like a dark greeny kind of colour, maybe something like that, and the other one to a light green or a yellowy green, maybe something like that. Yeah, that'll do. Maybe a little bit more yellowy perhaps. That looks okay. So I'll export that, put into Blender, Alt-N-R, select my leaf, and I'm going to move it over here, scale it on the X, of course me. Let's just turn off that cursor as the pivot point so it doesn't move. Okay. So let's have another look at this. We have got way too much geometry, so I'm going to get rid of a load of these. We definitely need the middle one. Maybe I could get rid of just these to start with. These ones. So Control and X to dissolve those. That'll do for now. I might get rid of these ones as well. I haven't decided. But you can see these are just kind of, it's just going from green to yellow and nothing else really at the minute, which probably isn't what I want. I think what I'd like to do is scale the whole thing right down on the Y so it's really squished, and move it down so it's all dark. And then if I select these middle ones, the middle vertices, which are the ones that runs up the centre, if I move these up, I've got a bit of a vein going on. That's quite nice. I like that. So yeah, I like that. That's fine. So I'm going to assume I'm finished and just apply everything. And we'll stick that in the centre as well with Alt and G, brings it to the world centre. And I'll move it down a bit. This probably needs to be moved up a bit. Yeah, that'll do for now. It's not very neat and tidy, but you know, I'm not going to spend ages doing that. The main thing is now, how do we apply this? Because it's all one material. How do we apply it in Unity? Well, it's not hard. So I'm going to create, this is what we did last week, if you remember, with the alpha channels and stuff. And I'm just going to create another folder, and I'll call it flower, and I'll create a scene which I'll call flower, because why not? And I'll go over to shading. I'm going to save this image, save a copy into my banter folder. And I should have one called flower. Yes, I do. Call it Colour Atlas. Where am I? Unity. There we go. Colour Atlas. So we can create a material, which I'll just call colours, and I'll create, that's not what I wanted, I'll create a shader for the material. In this case I use Amplify. You could use one of the standard shaders, like I don't know, maybe Autodesk Interactive or something, to your roughness all the way up, put your image in there. There's a lot of stuff going on here. It's, even if you don't use metallic and roughness and normals and all of that, it's still got to do, like, work through all of the nodes in the shader and do all of those calculations. I know it's only one material and you could probably get away with it, but because there are some people who use Amplify anyway, I'm sure you know what to do. It's as easy as anything. I'm just going to drag that onto my material, open it up, and then I can drag my image in and plug it in. It's as easy as that. And that is like the simplest shader you could possibly get, other than having a plain colour. Like I say, if it's one material, don't worry about it. You don't have to use Amplify. By all means, use something else. But if you're going to be using normals, just be very wary, because the standard shader in Unity doesn't play well with Banter when it comes to normal maps, and you're much better off doing your own shaders. So yeah, we've got that. We now need to export this. And probably the easiest way is just to hit F4, which brings up your file context menu, which is the same as doing this. F4, we want E for export, F for FBX, choose selected objects only, and it's the mesh, and stick it in the same folder, flower, and we'll call it flower. Sorry, I hit the keyboard a bit hard there and heard it echo through me, the arm for my microphone. Hope I didn't deafen you. And then usually what I do is once I've got my object, my FBX file, I usually just plug the colour straight into there and it replaces anything that might have been exported with it. And then I can just bring it into the scene and it is pretty huge. Because we'll have a look at this. I didn't resize it, so this flower is actually over 2.5 meters wide. So it's a big flower. That's why I had to zoom out. But yeah, it works. And the gradient looks pretty good. There is, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but I can just see a tiny little bit of banding. It's fine for small objects. You'll never notice it. But I wouldn't recommend using this on something like, say, a wall or a ground, because you will need a very large texture to get enough pixels to not be able to see the banding for the different colours. So just be aware of that. But for things like this, for flowers and leaves and stuff, it's pretty cool. And it's not as if we've baked a texture or anything. It's just a basic thing that we made in GIMP. And you can see we've used a tiny part of the image. We can do so much more here. It'd just be so cool. As many colours as you like, really. The only thing you can't do is bake the lighting, because if we go into edit mode and select everything, you'll see we've got all of these overlapping islands for the petals and the leaves, and that just looks naff. It's just going to cause a load of problems. You can't have overlapping islands and distorted, well, not really distorted islands and things as well. So what I would recommend is always I would recommend creating your own light map. Don't do it in Unity, because once you've played around with the UVs and twisted them up the way I have, it's going to have a hell of a time automatically creating a light map channel. So we do our own instead in Blender. As long as it's the second UV channel, you're fine. Unity will always look for a second UV channel and use that for baking the light maps. If there isn't one, it'll attempt to use the first UV channel. 9 times out of 10, that's the problem when people aren't getting their lighting baked. If it just looks, and I'm not just talking about a bit blotchy, I'm talking about being totally messed up. It's probably because there's no second channel. I usually rename my second channel to light map, so I can't make a mistake and start unwrapping the wrong channel. For this one, we're just going to do a basic smart UV project is good enough. And let's just get rid of that. As long as it's got plenty of padding in between the islands. You can always adjust it afterwards as well. Just make sure there's enough padding between the islands. And you'll see why in a minute, because this probably isn't enough. But we'll export it again. And it's just going to overwrite the one that's in the scene. So this now has a second UV channel in it. We need to mark this as contribute to global illumination. And we need to mark that as baked. And we need to create a new, well, I have done. If you have a look, it says it's static. At the end of the day, all static is a list of flags. And one of them is to contribute GI. That's for your light baking. That's all that is. This is for your occlusion culling. This is for whether or not you use batching, which is just a way of how it loads in each mesh. There's instancing where you can reuse the same mesh over and over and over again. It'll load that one mesh in and then be provided a list of coordinates where to render each one of these meshes. So I could have a field full of flowers, for instance, and just have the one asset. You could also do batching static, and what batching does is Unity will load in all the meshes in one go, in one big mesh, and then break them all up and render them individually. Sometimes that works well if you've got lots of very unique assets, but generally I don't always use it. Occlude is also for your occlusion, culling and reflection probes if you've got a reflection probe in the scene. So usually you don't need to tick all of them, just whatever you need, because that will actually, well, it's supposed to improve performance if it doesn't have to check for everything. So for this contribute GI, there's a handy little tick box here instead. You'll see it's unmarked. So that's all I'm doing is marking it for the light mapping. So I'm just going to change that to GPU for speed, and we'll do auto generate and go back to the inspector and see what happens.
Not bad.
And it has actually worked. I wasn't expecting it to. It's probably because it's such a big object. But normally, if you haven't got enough space between your islands, it'll tell you you've got some UV overlap, even though you clearly haven't when you've done it in Blender. And I was hoping to demonstrate that, but let's see if I can reduce that a bit more. We'll just turn that down to 0.2. And just let it rebake. And I will kick myself if it says there's still no UV overlap. Oh man, I'm obviously doing too good of a job. Right, let's try again. This is definitely not going to work. Man, that's not supposed to happen. But normally, like I say, it's because it's so big. What we'll do is we'll just reduce this from 40 to 20, the texel density. Now we've got some overlap. So you see here, this game object has overlapping UVs. Please adjust mesh importer settings or increase chart pattern in your modeling package. So like I say, I would either increase the pattern, and you can see that it isn't working because we've got some shadow bleed here and a little bit here. And the reason that happens is because if you have a look at the UV overlap here, each one of these little squares on the grid is a single pixel of colour. And if you've got islands which are occupying the same pixel overlapping, you'll get these red patches where it warns you it's happening. And that's where you get shadows bleeding from one island to another, and you get these horrible blotchy marks on things. So what I normally do is I either increase the pattern in Blender, which does work, but you've got to remember it makes your island smaller. So although it'll get rid of the blotchiness, your shadows will become more jagged because it'll be rendered using fewer pixels and you'll get these jagged edges. Or you can do another thing, which is to increase the scale in the light map, which will just make it bigger so it uses more pixels, and because it's getting bigger, it's increasing the space between the islands as well. So we could turn that up to 2. My warning's gone, my red marks have gone, and if we let it finish baking, it's not quite completely gone there, but it's better than it was. And but you can see here, because I turned the texel density down to 20, this is a bit more jagged here, and it's not quite as smooth as it was. I think as standard in Unity's own light mapping, it's 40. If you use Bakery, its standard is 20, but I usually turn it up to 40 anyway, because it still produces smaller light maps than Unity's built-in light mapping system. And you can see, turn it up to 40, it's a lot smoother than it was, the shadows now. We could, how we're doing for time, 15 minutes, let's get rid of this. We'll get rid of the baked data, and I'll get rid of that. And we'll do it with bakery this time. So the only thing I need to do is add a bakery script to the directional light. So bakery direct light script, match light map to real time. And I'll turn that up to 40. I didn't check to see how big the light map was actually, but I can guarantee it's smaller. Yeah, we'll save it. And bakery's so much quicker as well. And bakeries is a bit blotchy as well, to be honest. But that's mainly because bakery uses, it tends to use smaller, what am I going to say? It uses fewer samples generally, and it denoises the light maps as well, usually. And small things, it's not great. You do have to play around with the settings a bit. But generally I find if you turn the samples right up, and maybe under advanced mode, you could perhaps turn on the ambient occlusion, give that a strength of 1. There's loads of different things you can do to fix it. Bounces are already up to 5. You can increase the texel density, you can increase the scale in the light map, so many things that you can do. But like I say, it's all personal preference. I do think Unity's light mapping generally does a pretty good job, but it just takes so long. By the time you turn all the samples and the bounces up to get the best results for your final render, I used to leave a project running overnight and get up in the morning and it still wasn't finished. Whereas bakery can do a whole large scene in 20 minutes. Now that's looking better already, just by adjusting a few settings. So yeah, and it's quite nice, it works okay. Only thing is, bakery gives you very, very black shadows, and that's because Unity's lighting is influenced by the skybox, and bakery isn't. So if you want more realistic shadows, you need to add another bakery thing, which is a skylight. And you have to give it a colour. Usually I pick a colour from the skybox so it does actually match. And I generally just use the eyedropper and pick something like a bluey colour, maybe like that. And if we render it again, you'll see that those really, really black shadows under the petals become a lot more realistic looking, with that slight bluish light from the sky. And give it a minute to finish. I've gone off on a tangent, talking about lighting. It is a bit of a passion of mine, but there you can see the shadows are way better now that the skylight's in. That looks so much better. So yeah, we've got a baked flower. That sounds like something of a cookery program, doesn't it? Anybody fancy cake? So yeah, there we go. It was very quick. I feel like I haven't spent much time on that, but basically, yeah, the power of gradients. I just think it's so cool that you can do a gradient like that and yet end up with something like these leaves. I just think it's awesome what you can do. And these little petals. Oh, there was something else. I wonder if I can do it in like 10 minutes. Something else I wanted to very quickly cover as well. because I know last week we briefly went over the lerp node in Amplify, and I didn't really show properly the equivalent in Blender and a very cool thing you can do with it. So I'm going to add in a plane ever so quickly. Let's just pretend that this plane is the ground, and it's going to be grass with a brown path. I'm just going to use colours to demonstrate it. But one of the things, if you remember last week, we used an alpha image or a black and white image, which we used as an alpha mask in a lerp node as an interpolator, so we could mix two textures. And one texture would cover all the black parts of the mask, and one texture would cover all the white parts of the mask. And it basically blended them all together. And that's what you saw at the beginning in Unity when we saw that column that we worked on last week. I'm going to do the same thing but in real time. So I'm literally just going to create a shader with two colours, one for the green and one for the brown. We need an RGB and we need two of them. So I'll just duplicate that. We'll make one of them a greeny colour, something like that, and one of them a browny colour, something like that. That can be the path. Say it's going to be like a dirt path or something. We're going to mix them together with a mix colour node. And we'll plug that one in the top and that one in the bottom. And then this, if you remember in Amplify, they had another node that was underneath, which was called Alpha. This one's called Factor. And this is where we're going to plug in our interpolator. So I'm going to create a new image. I'll call it Alpha. And it doesn't make sense, but we don't need an alpha channel. It's going to be an alpha mask. So I'm just going to turn off alpha there. Bring that in here. That's going to plug into there. Into the factor, and then the result of it all is going to go into the colour. So at the moment, because this is totally black, it's only showing the green colour. But if we select this, go back to the layout and change this from object mode to texture paint, we'll go up to the top to the little tools, and you can see here's our texture we've selected, which is called alpha. And we've got black and white, which is what we want, because the alpha mask is black, and we're going to paint in white on the top. So I'm going to press 7 on my numpad to go into orthographic view, and I'm going to paint me path on it in that brown colour.
Pretty cool.
And you can see it's got nice soft edges as well. If you imagine, you could replace these colours with like a tileable grass texture, and this could be tileable sand or gravel or anything you wanted, and it just works. All we do now when we go into shading, there is our alpha that we've just painted. We just save a copy, which I'll stick into the same folder there. Back into Unity. I'll bring in just a Unity plane, I guess. And we'll do the same thing, create a material, which I'm going to call ground. And another shader, which I'm going to call alpha, because it's using an alpha. We'll bring that in there. We want two colour nodes, just the same as in Blender, but instead of a mix colour node, we're going to use a lerp node, and that's where your alpha plugs in. Colour 1 in there, colour 2 in there, and into the albedo. So this, I'm going to make it a property. And I'm going to call it, well, we'll leave it as colour 0. And this will make a property. This, yeah, we'll just leave that as well. So if I save that, probably plug that under there. Have I brought the wrong one in? Of course I have, you know. Why have I got... Oh, I've plugged the wrong thing in. Lisa, you complete numpty. Right, okay, that's fine. So, there's my material on the ground. We just need to choose the colours. So we've got green. And then the second colour can be brown or whatever colour you like. Something like that. And there is our path. So yeah, lerp nodes, great fun. Like I say, you can have 2 textures and without having to do anything fancy, you just paint your paths and your roads and your stuff on. It's so much easier. How we're doing for time? 3 minutes. Let's have a quick look here for gravel, maybe. We'll try ambient CG. One of these will do. Any one. We'll have this one. Gravel 22. Download that. Now I'll just cut that, pop it into the projects, temp, flower, paste it in there, and I'll unwrap it, or unpack it rather. Just delete the original. So there's my gravel. So we'll just do it directly in there. Open that up. We need to change this to a texture. So instead of the colour, I'm going to plug in the texture. We'll call that gravel, or texture 1 or texture 2. I'm just calling it gravel because it's easy to remember. And we should be able to just drag that into there. And we've got some gravel. And if you imagine doing that with like the normal and putting grass on here and altering maybe the scale of it, maybe make that 5 by 5. Yeah, doesn't look too bad. So yeah, as I say, power of alphas.
Good fuzzy edges. Nice.
It has got fuzzy edges. In Blender you can make this as fuzzy as you like, and one of the nice things about it when you paint your own as well, if we go back to texture paint here, it's got all these different things you can do. You can soften it by just going over here and making it a bit more fuzzy, or you can smudge it as if you've run your finger through it, or you know, lots of things you can do. It's just like a simplified paint package, but does some pretty cool things. And if you wanted to make this a bit of a crinkly edge, you could. Yeah, just I'm not very artistic, so I'm not very good at that, but I'm sure somebody could do some really cool things with that, with these soft edges. It just blends them together nicely.
Looking good.
So yeah, anyway, it's 8 o'clock. Thank you everybody for coming. I hope I say this every week, I hope I haven't gone too fast and covered too much stuff too quickly, but that's the point of the videos. Go and have a look at them and just pause it and go through at your own speed.
Exactly.
But yeah,
That's great.
can I say
We almost
two
had time to
barks?
scatter the flowers on the grass. I thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
In the last minute.
Yeah, well, we can if nobody's in a hurry. Yeah, we can certainly scatter them. To be truthful, you can scatter in Blender, but you can also scatter in Unity. That will take a little while to go through it. I have gone through it before in previous videos, but I'm happy to do it again next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's best to keep going over stuff anyway, because repetition is how you remember, isn't it? So that's why I open Blender every single day, and quite often I'll open it and do the same thing every day for a week. And then I remember how to do it. So
And since you can scatter in Blender or Unity, would you scatter in Blender or Unity? Right?
it depends. It depends on how many things I'm scattering. If there's not very many, I would do it in Blender because you get better results. However, because if I'm scattering one object, I want to reuse that one object however many times, however many instances I've scattered across the surface.
Batch it.
And the only way I can work out how to do that is to bring everyone in individually and make sure that I'm getting exactly the right position, scale and rotation on each one to perfectly replicate what I had in Blender. Now maybe that is just me being totally anal because I like things to be perfect, or maybe there's a quicker way of doing it. If it's a hell of a lot of objects, I would just do it in Unity and just make a few visual changes if I think they needed it on some objects. Like I say, Unity's not as good, but you can still get some pretty good effects and do some cool things. So, yeah, we'll cover that next week. We'll do scattering next week and show the differences between Blender and Unity and the best use cases for each one as well. I think might be a good idea. Okay, well, I guess this means it's officially over, so I'm going to end the recording and we'll get that uploaded tonight.